Hey everybody, Nick Nack here, back again for another video after how long? It's the beginning of the year, so you know what that means. It's the video where I'm most consistent with, and that's my top 10 games of 2022. Last year for me was kind of interesting in the sense that while I was able to get PS5 and balance my gaming time with my responsibilities, I unfortunately didn't achieve certain gaming goals, and the titles people will tend to put on their lists I won't have. That being said, don't expect games like Xenoblade 3, the new Kirby, God of War, and especially Elden Ring to be on here, because I have my reasons. Even so, I've played enough to make a top 10 and even an honorable mentions list. So how about we start with those mentions first? I've only put an hour or so into Multiverses, but for what it's worth, it's a good game. It's free, has a decent roster, great developer support, and its gameplay is different enough to prevent it from being a copy pasta of Smash Bros. Despite being critical of Eiyuden Chronicle Rising, I still enjoyed it to where I'm mentioning it. Sure, it's way too easy and you do nothing but fetch quests, but it's kinda relaxing to where it's great to play while putting on a YouTube video or a podcast. Young Souls is a game I do not understand the hate for, to the point I actually recommend playing it. The gameplay is solid, the art style is pretty good, and it doesn't overstay its welcome. Ghost Song is a pretty damn good Metroidvania with some great Metroid-like gameplay, tons of exploration, and a nice presentation to it. Despite it being weak near the end, I found it to be worth playing. Chained Echoes is most likely a game to be very high on people's lists, and I can see why, as it's the complete package in terms of all its aspects. It unfortunately doesn't make the top 10 for the sole fact that I only put 2 hours into it. Still, I'm liking my time with it right now. Now that the honorable mentions are done, let's begin the countdown. Starting up the countdown at number 10 is Jack Move. This was a game I had no knowledge of until I saw it retweeted on my Twitter timeline, and considering it looked like Cosmic Star Heroine, I picked it up. It may not have any similarities at all, but was still a solid game. This is an indie game that has you playing as a woman fighting against a corporation in a cyberpunk setting. The plot is standard, yet easy to follow, but what makes this title stand out is both the presentation and gameplay. The world of Jack Move is comprised of a nice pixelated art style that's full of bright neon colors that support the characters and setting. Audio-wise, the game has no voice acting, but the music and sound effects are catchy with electronic chiptune style that supports the areas and battles throughout. Speaking of which, the gameplay is really damn good, as it's a turn-based RPG that does a lot to feel different. First off, instead of a party, you're just controlling one single character, which is great as you don't have to deal with hassle. When it comes to battles, it's your standard random encounters with turn-based combat, but what makes it fun is finding what elements the enemies are weak to and exploiting them with your attacks. In addition, gaining and upgrading your attacks provide more depth to fights, and it's fun mixing which attacks you want to equip. It only starts the list because it takes a few hours to beat and you're left alone wanting more, which is why I'm starting it. Still, for price and gameplay alone, I highly recommend Jack Move. Coming in at number 9 is Vampire Survivors. I remember seeing a YouTuber I'm a fan of play this and was interested in it for how fun and simple it looked. A few weeks later, I see it on Game Pass, and considering it was about to get its proper release in October, I started it up. The hype is real because this has been one of the most fun experiences I've had in a while. According to its Wikipedia entry, this game is a roguelike shoot 'em up where you go through hordes of enemies in varying locations. While the story isn't anything to write about, the game makes up for it in its nice 8-bit presentation and enjoyable gameplay. You just pick a character and move them around to a spot on the map while they automatically attack enemies on their own. After each run, you can spend more on better characters and upgrades, and this is where the fun happens, as the more you improve, the better your runs get, and the more exciting it gets with enemies barraging you and making it more intense. It's just so fun and addicting, trying to up each run in the various stages, and every playthrough gives different ways on how to get new things. Despite the praise though, it's pretty low only for the sole fact that I've hit a roadblock in progressing. Still, this has been one of the most enjoyable games I've played this year. At number 8 is Midnight Fight Express. In an effort to increase my 2022 releases beaten list, I saw this title in Game Pass and tried it. Talk about a surprise since this game was great. The best way to describe it is if my friend Pedro was a beat 'em up, it would be this game. Basically, you go through a stage that's around 5 to 10 minutes long, and you fight hordes of enemies thrown at you, and you do it in style to get a good rating at the end of each level. It just plays so good with all the variety you're given, from various ways to attack to tons of weapons all around you. It also helps that there's plenty of replayability, as you can earn EXP and in-game cash that can both upgrade your attacks and provide customization for your characters. One more thing to note is that going through a game is nice thanks to a story that's pretty easy to follow and has nice plot twists here and there. In terms of presentation, the graphics are the most weakest part, but that's okay since it's a $20 game, and they make up for it with soundtrack, which is an array of techno and dubstep that brings an adrenaline rush to each level. It may look weak and not do anything amazing, but for the price and content given, this was a damn good sleeper hit of the year. For my number 7, I'm putting High on Life. Ever since playing Trover Saves the Universe, I've made sure to keep my eye on Squanch Games titles, and this one delivered on being promising. This game is an FPS that has you going around alien worlds, defeating varying alien bosses, and gaining new weapons and upgrades to progress further in the game. The gameplay doesn't do anything innovative, but works well as it's not too hard or too easy when you're playing gunfights, and the upgrades and abilities provide more enjoyment as with most games. Talking about presentation is a mixed bag, as there's some technical problems with glitches and pop-ins, but on the flip side, the art direction is sweet with all the details going around each of the planets you visit. It honestly makes you forget about them. If there's one thing about this game that makes it stand out, it's the story and dialogue, which should be no surprise as it tends to be Justin Roiland's forte. The plot is a basic Save Earth and Humanity story, but the concept is nicely different and the characters you meet throughout aren't flat, especially with the hilarious dialogue they're given. The game isn't Trover Save the Universe levels of funny, but it works well at times. If you're judging this game based on its review scores, you're honestly missing out, because this was a good game that's surprisingly easy to play right now. Please go check it out. My number 6 game is Horizon Forbidden West. To tell you the truth, I haven't beaten this game yet. Still, I've put enough hours into it where I'm confident enough to put it on the spot. Thanks to it being a pack-in game for my PS5, I was able to play it, and so far it's well deserving of the reception it got. Some people might have problems with this, but this game honestly feels exactly like the first. For me, that isn't really bad, as it's one of those times where if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Horizon Zero Dawn was my second favorite game of 2017, so seeing them take what was good from the first and using it here was something I was okay with. So far, the story seems like a basic save the world from a greater threat plot, and it's serviceable. The biggest strengths with the game though are its presentation and gameplay. Since it's a Sony exclusive, the graphical power is really impressive with the scope of the world and the various detail in both the setting and objects. People also claim that the game has great art direction, and that definitely is agreeable, as both the robots and the cities are so beautiful to look at and are filled with life. But of course, what made Horizon memorable for me was the gameplay, and it's so nice to play after how long. I just love going around taking down all these machines by trying to find their weaknesses and breaking them down piece by piece. It also helps with how they add new features to the game to make it fresh. The game was also enjoyable with how there's so much to do, with lots of map icons and side missions, which are personally a guilty pleasure of mine. I know this game didn't do anything revolutionary, but it's a very polished game, and I'm happy that it got the love it deserved. At number 5, we have Tunic. This was a game I had slight interest in after seeing it at E3, so a few months later, I soon find this on Game Pass and tried it because of it. Hot damn, was this game awesome. On first look, you might think it's a wet knockoff of The Legend of Zelda, but it isn't, as it's a really good game that does things to make it stand out. The story of the game honestly isn't too memorable, and I kinda didn't understand it still to this day. But how progression is used to build up the plot and mystery of the game is so good. At first, you're just put into a game with no knowledge of what's going on until you continue going through areas and are afterwards given information on how the game works via pages in an in-game manual. This feature is surprisingly unique, as it's a fun way to learn about the game without the use of a tutorial. It also helps with the fact that the gameplay feels nice, as the combat and movement feels fluid and not stiff. Finally is the presentation, and for what it's worth, it looks pretty good and sounds beautiful. Just the art direction and the use of neon colors gives it a calming feeling as you play, while the synth and melodic soundtrack make the game feel mysterious. Overall, this was one of the year's best indie games, and despite having a tough to get true ending, I highly recommend this game. Coming in at number 4 is This Way Madness Lies. If you see my previous countdowns, then you know that one developer I always tend to support is Zeboyd Games. Just recently, they announced their newest title was going to release this year, so I picked it up and man, they delivered again because this game was damn good. Just like all their titles, this game is an indie game inspired by JRPGs. If you played their previous 2 games, then you're in luck as this one is similar to them in both gameplay and art style. You're given a set of varying attacks and you can only use one each turn before running out until you restore them through defending. It's really unique, which is why there's no problem with them recycling it. Speaking of returning stuff, the art style of previous games returns and it still looks fantastic. One difference though is that the battle interface changed to look reminiscent of Shining Force, where the characters and enemies are given more detail. Lastly is the story, and man, is it the game's strongest suit because of how unique it is. The plot consists of mixing Sailor Moon with Shakespeare plays, and it works so good with how these characters go on with their daily lives of balancing school with their lives as magical girls. It's also supported with how humorous the dialogue is because I never got bored with it. It may be similar to Zeboyd's past titles, but the company continues to deliver, and this game is a notable package from them worth checking out. For my number 3 spot, I'm playing Pokemon Legends Arceus on here. Now I fell off of the Pokemon series for a while now because of oversaturation, but when I first saw the trailers to this game, I was interested with how different it looked from the mainline games, so I picked it up. I'm glad I did because this was a huge surprise. For the most part, the game has the usual idea of trying to catch all the Pokemon and build the Pokédex. Unlike the mainline games, however, the main goal of Arceus is a combination of death and trying to defeat certain Pokemon important to the plot. It feels nice as you don't have to deal with all these trainers trying to challenge you. Pokemon, however, still do try to fight you, but fortunately you can avoid them as they are visible on the map. Pokemon battles are the same as before, with one feature that lets you change the speed or strength of the attacks, and you really can't change something that isn't bad. If there's one thing that's bad though, to keep it a buck, it's the presentation, because the character models and the world look dated. It also doesn't help that it has technical problems with textures and glitches. That's okay though, since it isn't game breaking. Finally is the plot, and it's not the best, but it's easy to follow with trying to save the world from Pokemon bent on changing it. The thing worth playing this game for though is the gameplay alone, and that's the reason why it's so high at this spot. It overshadows the rest of the stuff for just being so fun and addicting. For that reason alone, I've enjoyed my time with it, and why my love for Pokemon might be reignited from this game. Taking up the runner-up spot at number 2 is Cult of the Lamb. I didn't really know much about this game until people on Twitter started talking about it, and they gave me FOMO. Luckily my brother got it on Steam, so I started it up, and man, the tweets were warranted. This game is a mix of a roguelike with a town building simulator that works so well to a point it's addicting. For the dungeon crawling part, you just go inside a dungeon and go through an array of enemies before defeating a boss. While on this expedition, you also gather resources and allies to bring into a cult to help you out. Whenever you feel like you're done with fighting, you can then go back to your cult and do various tasks, which the town building part comes in. These tasks range from construction, praying, or harvesting. It's just so fun trying to balance this gameplay, and it never gets tiring even when you unlock everything you can get. Just like my number 3 game, this title's gameplay is the big focus while everything else is just decent, which is fine for a game around $25. That doesn't mean they're bad though, as they work real well to complement the game. The title has a nice cartoony look and sound, which works with contrasting to the dark nature of what happens in the game. As for story, it's intriguing as it consists of doing the bidding of a godlike figure after he saves you from death, and it personally works well, especially the ending. This was a damn good indie game, and I know for a fact that Stray wasn't released this year, this would have been the category's best. Check it out and get addicted to it. And finally, taking the top spot at number 1 as my favorite game of 2022, we have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. Turtles in Time is my all-time favorite beat-em-up, so after seeing this game's reveal, I knew I had to day one buy this game because it looked very promising. Glad to say that it delivered because I freaking love this game. If you've played the various TMNT beat-em-ups made by Konami or even the Scott Pilgrim game, then you'll feel at home with this game. For the most part, the plot and structure is something you'd expect that's a nice nod for fans. Just going around saving New York from Shredder and his allies. What the game excels in though is this presentation and gameplay. The game's art style has a sweet 16-bit look to it, similar to past titles, but with a modern update that makes it feel fast and fluid. It also helps with the game looking so vibrant and full of both color and detail. It's also supported with a nice audio, as the sound effects are nice to ears, the voice acting is top notch due to the return of the cartoon's original actors reprising their roles, and the music is superb with its array of tracks both similar to past games and ones that feel modern. Now when it comes to gameplay, this is where the genre is best, and this one is no exception because it's just so well done. There's more than moving and pressing one button to attack, as there are various ways to attack, tons of combos, different commands, and special moves. It overall just has depth to it that makes it fun. It also helps that the characters move nicely as well. Now sure, the game doesn't have much in-game modes and you can beat in a few hours, but this was a well-made love letter to fans of the genre and the franchise, and for that alone, it deserves the love and my personal pick as Game of the Year. Alright, so those were my favorite games of last year. Let me know what games you were a fan of last year, because I always love reading the comments and knowing what others played. So as always, I want to thank you guys for watching, take it easy, and until next video, assuming I make one,